a handwritten note left for both of them. And in this note, Alyssa says, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided that I really am going to California. Sarah, you said you didn't want me around. Look, you got it. I'm gone. That's why I saved my money. Dad, I took $300 from you. Alyssa."
Turney hasn't been seen in more than 7 years.
Just a bombshell arrest tonight, almost 20 years after Phoenix teen Alyssa Turney vanished.
She said she was running away, but her phone was still here. Her bag, her wallet, her entire life untouched. They said she just needed space. But who writes a goodbye note and never leaves?
Careful, don't jump on top of anybody, Alyssa.
The words read, "Don't look for me." Those 5 words became the lie that fooled a city and buried the truth for 20 years. To understand that note, we must go back to who Alyssa really was. She was 17, sharp, outspoken, the kind of girl who knew what she wanted. She lived in Phoenix, Arizona, with her stepfather, Michael Turney.
Then we read the note, my heart just completely stopped.
It must have been terrifying for you.
Yeah. So I started, calling everybody I could call and telling them, look, we got a problem. We need to get everybody together now. We got to find Alyssa.
And little sister Sarah. Her real mother had passed years earlier. Michael had taken charge, the man of the house. Friends say she was independent, bold, ready for summer freedom. She had a part-time job, a boyfriend, and a party planned that night, but she never showed up. She had big plans, but sometimes plans end at the edge of normal life, and that's where her story stopped, right before the world found out she was gone. Welcome to True Crime Story Videos. Every face you'll see here once had dreams, laughter, and people who loved them, but somewhere along the way, their stories went silent. I'm Detective Daniel, and here we give those stories a voice again. Before we begin, take a moment. Tell me your name and where you're watching from. It was May 17th, 2001, the last day of junior year. 17-year-old Alyssa Turney woke up ready for summer. She packed her bag. She laughed with her little sister Sarah. She grabbed a soda from the fridge and said she'd be home by dinner. Alyssa went through the morning like every other student, joking with friends, planning a party for that night. But just before lunch, her stepfather, Michael Turney, showed up at the office. He signed her out early. He told staff he was taking her to lunch. No one asked questions. Why would they? Parents pick up kids early all the time. But that lunch would become the last confirmed moment anyone saw her alive. According to Michael, they argued about grades, about freedom, about rules. He said she slammed the car door, furious, and walked away. That's the story he told, over and over. But no one else saw that argument. No one else saw her leave. By nightfall, Alyssa hadn't come home. Her sister waited by the door. Dinner went cold. Hours later, Michael called police, said Alyssa left a note in her room. "Dad and Sarah, when I leave this house, I'm going to California. Don't look for me." It sounded like goodbye, but nothing about the room matched a runaway story. She didn't take her clothes. She didn't take her cash. She didn't even take her phone charger. On her desk sat her planner, with a note to meet friends that night, a party she never went to. Police took one look at the note and marked her as a runaway. Case closed. No search. No urgency. But her friends called all night. No answer. Her boyfriend waited at the party. She never came. By the time the sun rose again, her room looked the same, but something was missing. Something no one would find for decades. The truth. She was supposed to meet friends that night, but no one ever saw her again. Did she really walk away, or was she taken before she could? The next morning, police arrived at the Turney home. They didn't bring search dogs. They didn't seal off the scene. They didn't even dust for prints. To them, this wasn't a crime scene. It was just another teenage runaway story. The officer looked at the note, looked at Michael, and closed his notebook. "She's 17, he said. She probably needed some time." Michael Turney told them. Alyssa went to California. He said she had an aunt there. He said she wanted freedom. He said she left angry and never looked back. And police believed him. There was no alert, no highway search, no news coverage, just a girl, erased by a single word, runaway. By afternoon, the house was quiet again. The missing posters hadn't been printed. There were no calls for volunteers, no urgency, because in 2001, a teenage girl walking away from home didn't sound like danger. It sounded like choice, but Alyssa never made that choice. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't take her things. And yet, everyone moved on. Michael stayed home, telling neighbors she'd be back soon. He played her voicemail on repeat, pretending she might call. He even called her friends, just to say, "She's in California, don't worry." But no one ever heard her voice again. Inside that same house, her 12-year-old sister Sarah waited by the window. Every car that passed, she looked up. Every phone ring, she ran to answer. Days turned to weeks, then months, then birthdays with one empty chair. Each year Sarah grew older, but Alyssa stayed 17. Michael told everyone the same thing. She'll come home when she's ready. She's just being stubborn. She wanted to be free. But the truth didn't sound right, not even to a child. Even her school friends didn't believe it. They said she'd never just disappear. She was too organized, too responsible. She'd been planning that summer, a new job, her boyfriend, her future. So why would a girl with so much ahead of her vanish without a trace? Still, police closed her file as voluntary missing, and for years that label buried every lead that could have mattered. No missing person flyers, no follow-up calls, no investigation. The system had turned its back, and so had time. Inside the Turney home, things got even stranger. Michael began talking about the case more often, on his terms. He blamed the school. He blamed her friends. Sometimes, he even blamed Alyssa herself. He told anyone who'd listen that she ran to California with a boy. But no boy ever came forward, and no one in California ever saw her name. Years went by. 2002, 2003, 2004. Nothing changed. The same note sat in her file. The same story repeated like a broken record. Each time her family called the police, the answer was the same. She's 17. She can leave if she wants. But she hadn't used her social security number. She hadn't renewed an ID. She hadn't opened a bank account. Her life stopped that day in May 2001. Still, the case sat untouched, frozen under the word runaway. Sarah, still just a child, began keeping her sister's room clean, just in case she came home. She folded the same blanket every morning, left the same lamp on at night, and whispered goodnight to a bed that stayed empty for 7 years. Outside that house, time kept moving. New cases, new headlines, new families. But somewhere inside the Phoenix Police Department, Alyssa's name sat at the bottom of a filing cabinet, a ghost in a paper folder no one opened again. 17 years old, declared a runaway, forgotten by the system meant to protect her. The truth had been there all along, hidden inside a house that no one searched. Sarah grew up believing her sister would walk through that door one day. But deep down, the questions never stopped. Why didn't anyone look closer? Why did they believe the man who wrote the story? And why did they stop asking? Because in 2001, one note was enough to end a case. But 7 years later, someone finally asked the question that would change everything. What if she never left that house at all? The sound of time is quiet, but when a case goes cold, silence can be the loudest thing of all. Days turned into months, months into years, and the name Alyssa Turney slowly faded from every police file, every headline, every conversation. 7 years of nothing, 7 years of silence. Her family drifted apart under the weight of that silence. Birthdays came and went, Christmas cards with one name missing. Sarah grew from a child into a teenager, still keeping her sister's room just as she left it. Same bedspread, same posters, same hope. She told herself Alyssa might walk in any day, maybe angry, maybe changed, but alive.
She didn't know that sometimes silence means someone doesn't want you to find the truth. Michael Turney carried on like a man with nothing to hide. He moved homes, changed jobs, and every time someone asked about Alyssa, the story changed too. In one version, she ran to California. In another, she was working somewhere out of state. And in some, she didn't want to be found. He spoke like a man reading from a script, one written to protect himself. But no one pressed harder, because the police still called it a runaway case. And to them, runaways always come home. Eventually. By 2003, Alyssa's name wasn't even in the active missing list. The case file sat buried under new crimes, new faces, new stories that mattered more. The few people who remembered her stopped asking questions, not because they didn't care, but because no one answered when they did. It was easier to believe she'd started a new life than to imagine the truth, that something darker had taken her. Inside Michael's new home, the world looked normal, but behind that calm was control. He still talked about Alyssa. He played her old voicemails for guests. Sometimes he'd even call her cell phone, just to hear it ring once, then go to voicemail. Neighbors saw him outside on his porch, staring at the road, smoking, quiet. But what was he waiting for? Sarah, now older, started to ask questions of her own. But every answer led back to her father's version, a version she wasn't allowed to doubt. He told her, "Don't talk to police. They never cared." He said, "Your sister will come home when she's ready." She wanted to believe him. But each year that passed made it harder. By 2005, hope turned into habit. Sarah learned not to cry about it anymore. Her sister's name became something whispered, not spoken. The house felt different now, colder, quieter. Photos of Alyssa slowly disappeared from the walls. Her school trophies boxed away, and Michael, he was becoming someone else entirely. While the world forgot, Michael Turney built his own world inside those walls. He wrote long, angry letters to newspapers. He blamed unions, schools, old co-workers. He recorded hours of audio tapes, ranting about conspiracies that made no sense. He built a bunker of his own words, walls made of paranoia and control. He said Alyssa's disappearance was part of a plot. He said people were after him. He said everyone else was lying. Maybe he believed it, or maybe he wanted everyone else to. Outside, life kept going. Inside, the lies grew roots. The Turney home became a cage of memories. No laughter, no sound, no truth. Sarah learned to live with ghosts, one in her sister's room, and one sitting in her father's chair. Then came 2008, 7 years after the note, 7 years after the world stopped asking. Someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe a stranger, made a call that changed everything. A tip, a suspicion, a reason to look again. And this time, when detectives opened that old file marked runaway, they noticed what no one had before, the cracks. They decided to search Michael Turney's home, and what they found wasn't just evidence. It was fear. It was danger. It was preparation for something no one saw coming. They came looking for answers about a missing girl, but what they uncovered was an entire arsenal, hidden under years of dust and lies, boxes, wires, pipes, notes, a house full of secrets and explosives. For 7 years, silence had been his shield, but that silence was about to break, violently. The truth wasn't buried, it was waiting, ready to explode. Then detectives got a new tip, and when they searched his home, the truth began to explode, literally. 7 years after Alyssa disappeared, detectives finally came knocking. They weren't sure what they'd find. A clue, a letter, maybe a confession, but what they walked into was something no one could have imagined. On December 11, 2008, Phoenix police raided Michael Turney's home. They came looking for signs of a missing 17-year-old. Instead, they found enough explosives to destroy a city block. Dozens of homemade pipe bombs, assault rifles, shotguns, stacks of ammunition. They thought they were searching for a runaway's trail. They found an arsenal instead. Detectives called in the bomb squad. Neighbors were evacuated. The street was sealed off. One officer described it as walking into a war zone built by one man, but this wasn't just about weapons, it was about obsession. Inside his office, police found hundreds of handwritten notes, rants, threats, and manifestos, pages filled with paranoia, anger at the world, anger at the government, and anger at anyone who dared question his version of Alyssa's story. He wrote that unions had plotted against him, that someone had kidnapped his daughter to punish him. He blamed everyone, except himself. In one corner of the room sat a box of old VHS tapes, each one neatly labeled, kitchen, living room, hallway, Alyssa's room. He had cameras in nearly every room. He recorded everything, everyone, every sound, every movement, except one day, the day Alyssa vanished. Detectives spent weeks reviewing those recordings. They watched birthdays, dinners, arguments, the life of a family under constant surveillance. They found nothing of the day that mattered most. One tape was missing. One date was blank. May 17, 2001, the last day of school. He told police he'd erased it. He said it didn't matter, but detectives knew better. They'd seen men like this before, men who needed control so badly they recorded proof of it. Only this time, his control had crossed into something else. Among the piles of notes they found something else, a letter addressed to law enforcement. In it, Michael wrote that he planned to confront the local union building. He claimed they were behind Alyssa's disappearance. He said he was ready to end it all, ready for war. Police realized he hadn't just been angry. He'd been preparing for violence. Agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms were called in. The entire neighborhood was evacuated for hours. The bomb squad dismantled each pipe bomb, one by one inside the same home where Alyssa once lived. They carried out box after box of evidence, bullets, wires, explosive powder, and as detectives searched, one truth grew clearer. Michael Turney's obsession hadn't started with Alyssa's disappearance. It had ended there. Every wall, every note, every recording told the same story. A man losing control while pretending to have it. Investigators found journals where he wrote to Alyssa, as if she were still alive. Letters to newspapers, claiming the police had framed him. Rants on tape about corruption and conspiracies no one could follow. It was the mind of a man consumed by anger, fear, and something darker. Detectives began to wonder, had he built this world to hide guilt or to protect himself from it? They found no trace of Alyssa's body, no direct proof of murder. But what they did find, the bombs, the threats, the missing tape, was enough to charge him with dozens of federal weapons crimes. He was arrested, convicted on explosives charges, and sent to prison. But even behind bars, he never changed his story. He said the system was lying, that his daughter ran away, that everyone else was out to get him. And the one person who believed him the longest was the only one still waiting for answers, his daughter Sarah. She was grown now, trying to live a normal life, but her father's arrest only raised more questions. If he was innocent, why the bombs? If he cared, why the lies? And if Alyssa really ran away, why did he watch the house for years, as if expecting her ghost to come home? They thought they were looking for a missing girl. They found an arsenal instead. But hidden under all the explosives was something even more dangerous, the truth he'd tried to bury. He recorded everything, everyone, except the day she vanished. Why would a father need that many bombs and that many lies? By the time Michael Turney walked out of prison, the world had changed. But for his youngest daughter, Sarah, nothing had. She had grown from a scared 12-year-old into a woman still living with the same question. Where is Alyssa? Her father said she ran away. The police said the same, but her heart said something different. Sarah had spent her teenage years believing the story, believing the note, believing that one day her sister would come home. But as she got older, the cracks in that story grew wider. Her father's temper, his obsession with control, his constant need to talk about the case, and only on his terms. She began to remember things that didn't make sense. The cameras in the house, the way Alyssa was always watched, the arguments that ended with slammed doors and silence. By her mid-20s, Sarah couldn't live with the silence anymore, so she began searching. She went through boxes of her father's old things, legal papers, tapes, handwritten notes. Every drawer held pieces of a puzzle no one had ever solved. One night in a dusty cardboard box, she found the first tape. The label read, "Family." When she pressed play, her father's voice filled the room. Calm, cold, rehearsed. He talked about the case as if he were the victim. He said the police had lied. He said everyone was out to get him. But between the words, there was something else, something Sarah had never heard before. She found more tapes, dozens of them, tapes labeled with dates, tapes labeled with names. She stayed up all night listening, writing, rewinding, trying to find the truth her family had buried. And as the hours passed, her father's voice changed. It grew darker, angrier, more unhinged. He recorded himself calling the police, reporters, even strangers, blaming them for what he called a cover-up. He said he'd prove everyone wrong, that he'd make them pay. And then she heard it. One tape, buried under stacks of old cassettes, labeled only with her sister's name. Sarah pressed play. At first it was static. Then his voice, soft, almost whispering. The room went still. For the first time, Sarah heard her father speak about Alyssa in the past tense, and in that moment, everything she believed about her childhood shattered. Betrayal doesn't always happen fast. Sometimes, it happens slow, one realization at a time. She began connecting every piece. The missing tape from 2001, the bombs in the garage, the rants, the fear, the lies. She saw the man she once called Dad as the last person who saw her sister alive. She didn't stop there. Sarah filed public record requests, demanding copies of the police reports. She spent hours online, reading evidence logs, collecting documents. She spoke to detectives, reporters, and anyone who'd listen. She turned her pain into purpose. In 2019, she did something bold, something her father never expected. She started a podcast called Voices for Justice. Each episode, she spoke directly to the world. Not as a journalist, not as a detective, but as a sister. She told Alyssa's story, from the beginning. Every detail, every lie, every unanswered question. The podcast grew fast. Then came social media. Millions of views. Millions of hearts breaking for a girl they never met. Sarah used her voice to give Alyssa hers back. She read case files out loud, posted clips of police interviews, and replayed her father's own words. People began to see what she'd seen all along, that Alyssa Turney didn't run away. She was taken from her life. With every post, every upload, the pressure on law enforcement grew. The same police who once called Alyssa a runaway were now reopening her case. Sarah had done what years of silence could not. She made the world care again. Still, nothing could prepare her for what she found next. One night, while combing through another pile of recordings, she pressed play on one more tape, a voice memo her father left for investigators years earlier. He spoke calmly, almost proud. He said there's a reason they'll never find her. She froze. His voice was cold, certain, unapologetic. Betrayal turned into courage. Fear turned into fire. Sarah decided she wouldn't stay silent anymore. If the system wouldn't bring justice, she would. She released the tape. She confronted the past, and she forced the world to listen. Her podcast became more than a show. It became a movement. People demanded answers. Petitions spread. The name Alyssa Turney came back to headlines after almost 2 decades of silence, and at the center of it all was one young woman who refused to let the truth die. She had spent years searching for her sister, but what she found instead was the truth about her father. Then she heard his voice, saying something no one could ever forget. The sound of an old tape can haunt you. That soft click, the hiss of air before the words begin. A reel-to-reel recorder spins slowly, its wheels squeaking with age, and then his voice. Pause. She's not missing. Everyone knows what happened to her. Silence. Sarah froze. That single sentence, spoken by her father, confirmed everything she had feared for 20 years. She sat in the dark, staring at the machine as it played his confession over and over. His calm tone, his choice of words. No guilt, no hesitation, just certainty. She realized this wasn't just a recording. It was evidence, and it had been sitting in her hands the entire time. She knew she had to share it. But how do you take a decades-old case, ignored, forgotten, buried, and make the world care? Sarah found her answer in a place most detectives never look: social media. She uploaded the first clip on TikTok. It was only 15 seconds long. Her father's voice, his words. She's not missing. Everyone knows what happened to her. Within hours, the post exploded. Thousands of comments poured in. People asking, who is Alyssa Turney? Why isn't this man in jail? Within days, millions had watched. People began piecing together timelines, sharing articles, demanding action. True crime communities lit up overnight. Strangers became investigators. TV networks picked it up next. Interview requests poured in. Headlines appeared. Daughter demands justice in 20-year-old case. News anchors replayed the tape over and over. And for the first time, the nation was listening. Police, who once called Alyssa a runaway, were suddenly facing the public eye. Emails flooded their inboxes. Petitions reached tens of thousands of signatures, and detectives who had long moved on to other cases had no choice but to reopen hers.
Pressure can move mountains, and Sarah Turney had become a storm all by herself. Behind the scenes, investigators began reviewing the old evidence. The notes, the tapes, the reports from 2008. They spoke with new witnesses, re-examined statements, searched for connections missed the first time. They even brought in the FBI. Sarah continued releasing tapes one after another. Clips of her father ranting about conspiracies, voicemails where he threatened people who asked too many questions, audio of him describing himself as the victim. Each post hit harder than the last. The world was watching and demanding answers. Through all of it, Sarah stayed calm, methodical, almost detective-like. She didn't yell, she didn't accuse. She just showed the evidence and let his own voice speak. Millions of viewers became her jury. And for once, the court of public opinion was louder than the courtroom that never opened. TV crews began showing up at her house. Producers called her story a revolution, a modern fight for justice led by one woman and a phone. But Sarah wasn't looking for fame. She was looking for her sister. Every major outlet ran the headline: the stepdad, the tape, and the missing girl. The footage of Michael Turney in his front yard, older now, gray-haired, silent, played across every network. He refused interviews. He said the world had been turned against him, but no one was listening to him anymore. Public pressure forced movement. In 2019, detectives submitted the case to the county attorney's office. They said they had enough to move forward. Nearly 2 decades after Alyssa vanished, the system finally began to catch up. In August 2020, a Maricopa County grand jury issued an indictment. Michael Turney was charged with second-degree murder in the disappearance of his stepdaughter, Alyssa Turney. After 19 years, the words "case closed" were finally crossed out. Reporters flooded the courthouse. Sarah stood outside, shaking, holding a photo of her sister. She said, "This isn't over, but this is the start." The man who once wrote the note, who once called his daughter a runaway, was now standing in handcuffs. Every question Sarah had asked, every post, every tear, every sleepless night had led to this moment. After 19 years, the system finally listened. Detectives reopened the case, a new investigation began, and the public, once fooled by silence, refused to look away again. But with every victory comes a new question: what happens when truth and justice collide? When public outrage meets the courtroom? And when a daughter finally exposes her father, does she find peace, or just more pain? She had given the world the proof, the confession, the reason to act, but justice doesn't move at the speed of the internet. It moves in months, in hearings, in heartbreak. Michael Turney pleaded not guilty. The case would go to trial. The story that began with a single note on a bed had now reached the doors of a courtroom. She had fought the silence and won. She had made the world remember her sister's name. But no one knew what would come next. After 19 years, they finally put handcuffs on Michael Turney. Soft piano ends on a lingering note, fade to black. Sometimes justice moves like a storm, and sometimes it crawls through the years, waiting for the right moment to strike. It had been 19 years since 17-year-old Alyssa Turney vanished, 19 years since a note fooled a city, and now in 2020, the case that everyone forgot came back to life. On August 20th, 2020, police surrounded a quiet home in Phoenix, Arizona. They weren't there for a search this time. They were there for an arrest. Michael Turney, the stepfather who claimed his daughter ran away, was taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder. The same man who once told reporters he was innocent was now standing behind bars. For the Turney family, the moment was surreal. 2 decades of waiting, 2 decades of silence, and finally, a spark of hope. Sarah stood outside the courthouse with trembling hands. She told the cameras, "I've waited half my life for this. All I want is the truth." Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. This was the day she'd fought for and feared. Inside the courtroom, the air felt heavy. A row of reporters filled the benches. Detectives from the original case sat shoulder to shoulder, faces older, but eyes still searching for redemption. The man in the center of it all, gray-haired, stoic, calm, was the same man Sarah once called Dad. The prosecution called it a case of control and rage. They said Michael Turney killed Alyssa after years of strict rules and emotional manipulation. They said the note, the missing tape, and the bombs were all part of a cover-up. The defense painted a different story. They said Alyssa was a troubled teen, that she really did run away, that the system had turned a grieving father into a villain. 2 stories, 1 courtroom, and no body to prove the truth. The trial began in 2023, 22 years after Alyssa vanished. It was one of the rarest kinds of cases, a murder trial without a body, without a crime scene, built almost entirely on words and memory. Prosecutors showed evidence from decades past, audio tapes, handwritten notes, and witness statements that had gathered dust. They told jurors about the bombs, the cameras, the missing video from the day she disappeared. They played Michael Turney's own recordings, the same words that had haunted Sarah for years. The jury listened in silence. Some shifted in their seats. Some couldn't look away. Outside the courthouse, the crowd grew larger every day. Supporters held signs. Reporters broadcast live updates. Everyone was waiting for justice to finally speak. Sarah sat in the front row, clutching a photo of her sister. Every word from the witness stand cut deeper. She had dreamed of this moment, but living it felt different. The evidence was there. The motive was there. But so was the doubt. No body, no weapon, no definitive proof. The defense asked the jury to question everything. They said the state had built a case on emotion, not evidence. They reminded the court that Michael had already served time for his bombs and had never been charged before for murder until now. They said it was vengeance, not justice. The courtroom grew colder with each passing day. Every testimony felt heavier than the last. Sarah never missed a hearing. She sat behind the man she once loved, listening to the same voice that used to read her bedtime stories, now answering questions about death and deceit. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just watched. It took 2 decades to get here, but would justice finally speak? Closing arguments began. The prosecution called it a crime of control. They said this wasn't just a missing girl. It was a story of manipulation, fear, and silence. They told the jury, "He silenced her once. Don't let him silence her again." The defense argued back, saying the state had no evidence of murder, only suspicion. They said he was a flawed father, not a killer. They said reasonable doubt isn't a feeling, it's the law. When the jury left to deliberate, the world held its breath. Sarah sat alone in the hallway, hands clasped, eyes closed. 22 years of waiting came down to one decision. Hours passed. Then footsteps echoed through the hall. The jury was back. The courtroom filled again. The judge entered. Reporters lifted their pens, every eye fixed on the jury foreman. Sarah reached for her sister's photo, whispered, "This is for you." The foreman stood. He unfolded the paper. Then the verdict came, and it broke everything again. The courtroom was silent, not the kind of silence that comes from peace, but the kind that follows heartbreak. Every breath felt heavy. Every second stretched too long. The jury filed back into their seats. 12 faces. None of them looked up. The judge asked the question that had waited 22 years for an answer. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" A paper rustles. "Yes, Your Honor." Sarah held her breath. Her hands trembled as she clutched her sister's photo. This was it, the moment she'd dreamed of since she was 12 years old. The foreman stood. The words came slow, each one breaking the air. "We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty." It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. The sound of justice collapsing. Quiet, invisible, final. Sarah didn't move,
didn't blink. She just stared straight ahead at the man who raised her, the man who had walked her to school, the man who had just been freed. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just turned to the courtroom and nodded, as if to say, "I told you so." The judge thanked the jury. The gavel struck once, and just like that, 22 years ended with 2 words: not guilty. The cameras outside were waiting. Reporters pushed through the doors, their microphones chasing sound in a space that had none. Sarah walked out first, her eyes red, her voice barely a whisper. She said, "I wanted justice for Alyssa, but all I got was another goodbye." She tried to hold back tears, but her hands shook too hard. For years, she had begged the system to see what she saw, to listen to the tapes, to read the files, to look deeper. And now, the same system had closed its doors again. He walked free. After 22 years, no one was held responsible. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of supporters stood silent. The same people who had followed her story online, who had believed that this day would bring peace. They cried with her. Some hugged her. Others just stood still, unsure how to comfort a woman who had just watched justice slip through her fingers. Michael Turney walked past the cameras, without a word. No emotion, no remorse, just calm steps toward the car waiting at the curb. He didn't look back. He had been accused of killing his daughter. He had been tried, and now he was free. The law called it a verdict, but to Sarah it felt like another loss, because in that courtroom, the truth was louder than the evidence, and the evidence wasn't enough. She watched him disappear into the distance, and realized the man who took her childhood had just walked back into the world. Reporters asked her, "What happens next? Do you still believe he did it?" She looked up, tears streaking her face, and said only one sentence: "The truth doesn't die just because a jury can't see it." In the days that followed, Sarah went home to the same room where the fight for Alyssa began. Stacks of papers, tapes, notes, evidence that still screamed louder than the verdict. She knew the law had finished, but her mission hadn't. Freedom doesn't erase the truth. It only hides it longer. The case was over on paper, but in every mind that followed it, the story still lived, unfinished. Alyssa was still missing, her body never found, her story never complete, and her sister, the voice that turned silence into movement, wasn't done speaking yet. He walked free. After 22 years, no one was held responsible, but somewhere in the quiet, the truth is still waiting to be heard. The desert never forgets. At night, the wind moves through Phoenix like a whisper, carrying names, memories, and questions that never die. 24 years have passed since 17-year-old Alyssa Turney vanished. No calls, no sightings, no answers, but the silence she left behind still speaks. Her story ended on paper, but the truth never did. Every time the sun sets over the Arizona desert, someone lights a candle in her name. Tiny flames flicker in driveways, at vigils, in bedrooms where her photos still hang. And every light burns with the same question: why? If she ran away, why did she never call? She had friends, a boyfriend, a little sister who worshipped her. She had dreams of college, plans for summer, and a future she never got to live. No one ever heard her voice again. Not one letter, not one phone call, not a trace. So if she ran away, why did she leave her life behind? Some say she was scared. Some say she needed freedom. But what freedom ends in silence? Every clue points to home, the place she was supposed to be safe. If he's innocent, why the bombs? Why the notes filled with rage? Why the cameras in every room? Why the missing tape from the day she disappeared? Why did a father build an arsenal and point the blame at everyone but himself? Why would any innocent man need that kind of protection? The questions don't end with the verdict. They begin there. Sarah Turney still lives with those questions. Every day she wakes up in a world that has moved on, while her sister's story stands still. She visits the desert sometimes, the same endless landscape where police once searched with dogs and shovels. She says it's not peace she's looking for, it's truth. She still runs her podcast. She still tells the story, because every time she says Alyssa's name, someone new hears it for the first time. She once said, "As long as I have breath, my sister won't be forgotten." And she means it. Home videos fade across the screen. Alyssa laughing in the kitchen. Alyssa dancing with friends. Alyssa rolling her eyes at her father's camera. Moments frozen in time. The kind of moments families replay when they miss someone. Only these clips have no ending. They just stop. Just like her story. Where is her body? Where does a missing girl go when the trail ends at her doorstep? Police dug through backyards, searched fields, followed every rumor, every lead. Nothing. 24 years later, there's still no trace, no remains, no closure, just questions and echoes. Every secret buried leaves behind an echo, and hers still hasn't stopped. You can hear it in her sister's voice. You can feel it in every unanswered file, every empty space where evidence should be.
It's in the eyes of detectives who still wonder if they missed something. It's in the quiet of a courtroom long since emptied. Justice is supposed to bring peace, but for some families it only brings another kind of silence. Sarah once said she doesn't want revenge. She just wants to know where her sister is. Some nights she still dreams that Alyssa comes home, older, smiling, asking what all the fuss was about. And then she wakes up and remembers that some stories don't end. They linger. Out here, the desert holds its secrets, and somewhere beneath this same sky, one truth still waits to be found. If she ran away, why did she never call? If he's innocent, why the bombs? And if she's gone, where is her body? These are the questions that time can't bury, because every secret buried leaves behind an echo, and hers still hasn't stopped. The desert is quiet now. Alyssa's candles still burn against the night, tiny lights in a sea of darkness, each one a promise, each one a memory that refuses to fade. She was 17, she had dreams, she had a voice, and someone took it away. But even after 24 years, her story is still being told, by her sister, by her community, and by every person who refuses to let her name disappear. When a case grows cold, people stop asking questions. They move on. But justice doesn't live in time, it lives in persistence. Because silence protects the guilty, and stories like Alyssa's remind us why we speak. She wasn't a runaway. She wasn't just another file in a drawer. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She mattered. If you know anything about Alyssa Turney, if you remember something, saw something, heard something, no matter how small, call the Phoenix Police Department. Because sometimes the smallest truth is the one that breaks the silence. Tonight as we close this story, remember her not as a mystery, but as a voice that still deserves to be heard. This is more than a case, it's a reminder that justice can take years, but truth never dies. So we keep talking, we keep searching, we keep saying their names. This was Alyssa Turney's story. A girl who wanted freedom, a sister who fought for her voice, and a family still waiting for answers. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe, comment your name and where you're watching from, and share this story, because silence in unsolved cases is louder than words. For Alyssa Turney, for every missing girl still waiting to be found, we speak their names, because silence is never the end.